The Unfinished Garden. A story for gentle souls. The plan. There is a particular kind of quiet that settles over a house on a Saturday morning, when the rest of the world hasn't quite woken up yet and the light is still soft and unhurried. It was that kind of morning. One when Iris unrolled her plan first thing. She had been working on it for 3 weeks. Not the garden itself. No, the garden was still just a rectangle of patchy grass and good intentions behind her small terraced house. What she had been working on was the plan for the garden. 12 pages of it, printed and color-coded, with a hand-drawn map on the final page that she had redrawn 4 times until the proportions felt right. She spread it across the kitchen table. Now, smoothing the edges with her palms, and looked at it the way you might look at something you are both proud of and slightly afraid of. There was a section for the raised beds, 3 of them, running along the left-hand fence, built from reclaimed timber she had already sourced and stacked in the corner of the garden where it had been sitting, untouched, for 6 weeks. There was a section for the wildflower patch, which needed to go in the far corner where the light was a little dappled, and she had spent 4 evenings reading about which wildflowers were native to her region and which ones would attract the right kinds of bees. There was a climbing rose earmarked for the back wall, 2 varieties of lavender for the border, a small slate path that would wind, gently, not too formally, between the beds, and a little wooden bench that she would build herself, eventually. Eventually, once the other things were done. She made herself a cup of tea and sat down across from the plan and looked at it some more. The thing was, and she knew this about herself, had known it for years, Iris did not like to begin until she was sure. Sure that she had thought of everything. Sure that the sequence was right. Sure that if she started digging on a Tuesday afternoon she would not discover on Wednesday that she had put the beds in the wrong place, or chosen the wrong soil, or committed some irreversible error that would mean the whole thing would have to come apart. She took a sip of tea and turned to page 7, which was about drainage. Outside, the garden waited in the early light, quiet and unhurried, the way gardens tend to be. Her neighbor's name was Clement, and he had lived next door for longer than the street could quite remember. He was a tall man, though age had curved him slightly, the way old trees sometimes lean, not weakly, but as though they have simply decided to incline toward something interesting. He had large hands that were always a little dirty, the kind of clean dirt that comes from working with soil and not minding it, and he wore the same canvas jacket in all weathers, its pockets deep and mysterious, always producing something unexpected, a ball of twine, a spare bulb, a boiled sweet offered wordlessly across the fence. Iris had spoken to him in passing many times over the 18 months she had lived there. He was unhurried in conversation, which she found both calming and, sometimes, quietly unsettling. The way a very still pond can be unsettling, because you're not sure how deep it goes. That morning, as she stood at the back door with her second cup of tea, looking out at the garden and the stacked timber and the patchy grass, she heard the familiar soft sound of Clement moving around on his side of the fence. A snip of secateurs. A low, tuneless hum. "You're up early," he said, without appearing over the fence. He seemed to know she was there the way people who spend a lot of time outdoors learn to know things, through some quiet awareness of the air. "I'm looking at the garden," Iris said. A pause. Or thinking about it. She opened her mouth and then closed it again. "Both," she said, after a moment. She heard what might have been a small smile in his silence. "The wood's still there, I see," he said. "I haven't started yet," she said. "I'm still refining the plan." Another pause. Not an impatient one. Clement's pauses never felt impatient. They felt more like spaces he left deliberately, the way a good sentence sometimes needs a beat of silence to land. "Plans are good," he said eventually. "Yes," said Iris. Soil doesn't read them, though. She looked down into her tea. No, she said quietly. I suppose it doesn't. That evening, she added 2 more pages to the plan. One was about the optimal spacing for lavender. One was a revised timeline, pushed back by 3 weeks, because she had read something about ground frost and wanted to be careful. She fell asleep at her desk, her cheek resting on page 4, the color-coded key slightly smudged by morning. The first mistake. It was Clement who started it. Really? Though he would never have said so. It was a Tuesday, not a planned gardening day. Iris had designated Saturdays for that, when she came home from work to find a small brown paper bag sitting on top of the stacked timber by the back fence, folded over at the top. No note. She picked it up and opened it carefully. Seeds. A generous handful of them in a little cellophane pocket, hand-labeled in faded pencil, sweet peas. And beneath the packet, nestled in the bag like an afterthought, a single bulb of garlic, slightly papery and smelling of earth and something older. She stood there for a moment in her work clothes, bag in hand, looking at the timber, looking at the grass, looking at the small square of sky above the garden that was going a deep apricot color in the early evening light. She thought about the plan. Sweet peas weren't on it. She hadn't researched sweet peas. She didn't know where they would go, or whether the light on this side of the fence was right for them, or whether she should soak them first, or for how long, or in what. She looked at the bag. She went inside and put her work bag down and changed out of her work clothes. She made a cup of tea and didn't drink it. She went back outside. The light was still apricot. Just barely. She found a trowel in the old tin by the back door. She had bought 6 different trowels over the past month, researching each one, and had not yet used any of them, and she crouched down by the fence, by the foot of the timber stack, and she pressed the trowel into the earth. It went in more easily than she expected. She made a small hollow. She looked at the sweet pea seeds. She thought, I don't know what I'm doing. And then, because the light was almost gone and something in her had made a quiet decision without asking her brain's permission, she pressed 3 seeds into the hollow, covered them over, and sat back on her heels. That was it. That was all. She brushed the soil off her hands onto her trousers, her good trousers, she realized, the ones she changed into without thinking, and she looked at the small unremarkable patch of disturbed earth by the fence. Nothing to see. Really, just a beginning. The first mistake came on Saturday. She had finally started on the raised beds. The timber was good, solid and heavy, and she had watched 11 videos about joinery and bought a mallet and a set of corner brackets and laid everything out on the grass with a care that felt almost ceremonial. The first bed went together slowly but well. She was pleased with it in the measured, cautious way she allowed herself to be pleased with things. Not fully, not yet, because it wasn't finished, and unfinished things did not yet deserve the full warmth of satisfaction. The second bed was where it happened. She had measured twice. She was certain of this. She had measured twice and written the measurement down on a sticky note and stuck the sticky note to her sleeve. And yet, when she came to fit the second long plank, it was short. Not by much, 3 centimeters, perhaps 4, but short in a way that meant it would not fit, would not sit flush, would leave a gap that would let soil spill through and would bother her. She knew every single time she looked at it. She sat down on the grass. She looked at the plank. She had not bought spare timber. For a long moment she simply sat there, in the way that people sit when the thought they are having is too heavy to stand up with. The thought was this: if I can't do it right, what is the point of doing it at all? It was not a new thought. It visited her often, in various forms. Sometimes it arrived about emails she had drafted and not sent. Sometimes about phone calls she had rehearsed but postponed. Sometimes about the small watercolor set she had bought 2 years ago and never opened because she wasn't sure she would be good enough to justify using it. It sat with her now, comfortable and familiar and heavy, in the middle of the half-built garden. She didn't hear Clement come to the fence. She only noticed him when his shadow fell across the grass. "Measured twice," he said, looking at the plank. "Yes," she said. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Gentle, though. Happens to everyone," he said. "Once to me with a full greenhouse frame. Didn't speak to myself for a week." Despite herself, she almost smiled. "What did you do?" she asked. He looked at the gap thoughtfully. "Made it a feature," he said. "Put a piece of slate in. Looked deliberate." He paused. "Was better than what I'd planned, in the end." Iris looked at the gap. She tried to see it the way Clement was seeing it, not as an error, but as a space. A question the garden was asking her. "I don't have any slate," she said. "I do," said Clement simply, and disappeared back into his garden. He returned with 3 pieces of dark gray slate, irregular-edged and lovely, and handed them over the fence without ceremony. She fit one into the gap. It sat there, cool and solid and slightly imperfect, and it looked, she turned her head to one side, it looked, actually, rather beautiful. "Oh," she said quietly. Clement nodded, as if she had said something very wise. "The garden doesn't know what you meant to do," he said. "It only knows what's there." He went back to his side of the fence, humming his tuneless hum. Iris stayed where she was for a moment, looking at the slate, at the raised bed that was not quite what she had planned, at the small patch of disturbed earth by the fence where the sweet peas were doing whatever seeds do in the dark, quietly and without any instruction from her. She picked up her trowel. She kept going. The unraveling, and the rain. For 3 weekends after that, Iris made progress. Not the clean, sequential progress she had imagined when she drew the map on page 12, where one thing would follow neatly from the next like sentences in a well-structured paragraph. It was messier than that. More digressive. She would start on the slate path and then notice the soil in the far corner needed turning, and she would do that for a while, and then she would stop to look at something, and then the light would change and she would find herself simply standing in the middle of the garden doing nothing in particular. But things were happening. The second raised bed was finished, slate piece and all. The third was half done. She had turned the soil in the wildflower corner and it had smelled extraordinary, deep and dark and alive in a way that made her understand, in her body rather than her head, why people gave their whole lives to this. She had ordered the lavender, 1 variety, not 2, because she had decided that was enough for now, and it was sitting in small plastic pots along the back step, waiting. And the sweet peas, when she crouched down one morning to look, had sent up 2 thin green shoots that were so tentative and so determined at the same time that she had to resist the urge to say something to them. She was not happy exactly. She was not unhappy. She was in that particular state that comes from making something. A state she didn't have a name for. A state that lives somewhere between effort and hope, where the thing you are building is real enough to feel but not finished enough to see clearly. It was fragile, that state. And one Saturday morning in October, it broke. She had come outside early, before coffee even, because she wanted to get the third bed finished before the afternoon. She was kneeling in the damp grass, mallet in hand, when she noticed it. The second raised bed, Clement's slate, her imperfect timber, had shifted overnight. The ground had moved slightly with the autumn rain, or she hadn't seated it firmly enough, or both, and one corner had lifted just enough to let a slow tide of soil spill out onto the grass. She stared at it. It wasn't catastrophic. She could see that, in the part of her mind that was calm and practical. It was fixable. An hour's work, perhaps less. Reseat the corner, shore up the base, replace the soil. Simple enough. But she didn't move, because the other part of her mind, the louder part, the one that had been waiting patiently for a reason, had already arrived at its conclusion. "You see," it said, in the tone it always used, which was not cruel exactly, just very certain of itself. You see, you didn't do it properly. You rushed. You should have waited until you knew more, planned more, were more ready. Now look. She sat back on the wet grass. She looked at the plan. She had brought it out in a plastic folder, as she always did, and she looked at where she was, and she looked at the gap between the two, and it felt, in that moment, enormous. The wildflower patch was still just turned soil. The path was half laid. The back wall had no rows on it. The bench she was going to build herself existed only as a sketch on page 9. She had been doing this for months, and the garden still looked, to any passing eye, like a garden that had been started and abandoned. Unfinished, said the voice. Imperfect. Not what you meant. She put the mallet down. She went inside. She left the plan in its plastic folder on the wet grass, and she went inside and sat at the kitchen table and didn't make coffee and didn't cry and didn't do anything much. Just sat in the way you sit when the thing you wanted to love has started to feel like evidence of your own inadequacy. The morning passed like that. It was the knock at the front door that moved her. Clement. He was holding a tin, the old-fashioned kind with a floral pattern, and he held it out to her when she opened the door. Biscuits, he said. I made too many. This was, she suspected, not entirely true. But she took the tin. Come in, she said, because it seemed wrong not to. He sat at her kitchen table with the ease of someone who is comfortable in most places, and she made the coffee she hadn't made. And for a while they didn't talk about the garden. He asked about her work. She was a technical writer. She explained things for a living, which he found interesting in the quiet way he found most things interesting. She asked about his garden, and he talked about it without drama or pride, the way people talk about something they have simply lived with for a long time. Then he looked out of the back window at the garden, and at the plan still sitting in its plastic folder on the wet grass, and he was quiet for a moment. Bad morning, he said. The bed shifted, she said. The corner came up. He nodded slowly. The ground's been wet. I know. She wrapped her hands around her mug. I know it's fixable. She stopped. He waited. I just looked at it, she said, and I thought, it's been months. And it's still such a mess. And I've been so careful, and I've read so much, and I still can't seem to get it right. I can't seem to. She stopped again. Clement turned his mug slowly on the table. Finish it, he said. Finish it, she said. Properly. The way I meant to. He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the light shifted as a cloud moved, and the garden went from gray to a soft, washed gold, the way October light does when it remembers itself. Can I show you something? He said. She followed him through the side gate and into his garden, which she had never seen before. She didn't know what she had expected, something immaculate, perhaps, given how much time he spent in it. It was not immaculate. It was abundant. That was the word. It was a garden that had been lived in and added to and changed and left and returned to over many decades, and it showed all of that, the way a face shows a life. There were beds that were clearly very old, their edges soft and informal. There were newer patches, bolder, more experimental. There was a trellis along the back wall that was not entirely straight, and a pear tree that had not been pruned symmetrically, and a compost heap that was magnificent in its informality. And everywhere, in the corners, along the edges, spilling generously over paths, things were growing. Quietly, without apology, in every direction. How long have you been working on this? Iris asked. 31 years, said Clement. She looked at him. And it's not finished, he said simply, without any sadness in it. It'll never be finished. That's not, he paused, looking for the right words, finding them slowly, the way he did everything. That's not a failure of the garden. That's just what gardens are. They don't finish. They just keep becoming. Iris looked at the trellis that wasn't quite straight, at the pear tree, at the soft old edges of beds that had been changed and changed again. I think I wanted to build something perfect, she said quietly, and then live in it. Yes, said Clement, as if this were the most understandable thing in the world. Most people do, I think, at first. And then. He considered this. And then you realize, he said, that the living is the building. That there isn't a moment when it's done and you get to start enjoying it. You're already in the middle of it. You've been enjoying it all along, whether you noticed or not. She thought about the sweet pea shoots. The thin, tentative, determined little shoots she had resisted talking to. She thought about the smell of the turned soil. She thought about the slate piece in the gap that had looked, actually, rather beautiful. I noticed, she said softly. Sometimes. Clement smiled, a full one this time, which was rare enough to feel like a gift. That's enough, he said. Noticing sometimes is enough. What the garden became. She fixed the raised bed that afternoon. It didn't take an hour. It took 20 minutes, and it was simple. And when it was done it was solid and she pressed her palm flat against the timber and felt it not move, and that was enough. She didn't make a note of it. She didn't update the plan. She just moved on to the next thing, which was laying 3 more stones on the path, and then the next thing after that, which was nothing, just sitting on the back step with cold hands and a quiet mind, watching the light go out of the day. The plan stayed in its plastic folder. She didn't throw it away, but she stopped carrying it outside. November came, and with it the particular quality of stillness that arrives when a garden stops performing and simply rests. The lavender had gone in along the border, one variety, as she decided, small and silver-leaved and unhurried. The wildflower seeds were sown, though they would not show themselves until spring, and she was learning to be at peace with that, with the idea that she had done something she could not yet see the result of, and that this was not the same as having done nothing. The 3rd raised bed was finished, though its corners were not perfectly square. She had decided not to mind this. The slate path wound between the beds in a way that was gentle and slightly improvised and not quite what page 12 had shown, and she found, to her surprise, that she preferred it this way. It looked like a path that knew where it was going but wasn't in any particular hurry to get there. The back wall was still bare. The climbing rose she had planned for it, a pale pink variety she had spent weeks researching, remained unplanted. She had ordered it twice and cancelled the order twice. Now she had ordered it a 3rd time, and this time she had not thought about it very much, had simply clicked the button on a Wednesday evening without ceremony, and it was coming in the post sometime next week. It would go on the wall, or it wouldn't. It would thrive, or it would take a year or 2 to find its way. She was beginning to understand that either of those things was fine. Clement had given her something else, the afternoon she'd visited his garden. She had almost missed it. He'd said it quietly, as they came back through the gate, almost as an afterthought. You know what I've noticed, he had said, about people who need everything to be finished before they can enjoy it. She had looked at him. They spend a lot of time in the future, he said, waiting for a version of things that isn't here yet. And the present, the actual present, with all its gaps and slate pieces and wonky corners, just sort of passes by while they're waiting. She had thought about this for many weeks. She thought about all the things she had not let herself feel good about because they weren't done yet. The raised beds she'd built, 2.5 of them, that she had not allowed herself to be proud of because the 3rd wasn't finished. The evenings in the garden she had not quite let herself enjoy because the path wasn't laid. The sweet pea shoots she had almost not let herself love because she didn't know yet what they would become. All that waiting, all that deferral, all that happiness held in a kind of escrow, promised to herself for later, for when it was done, for when it was right. She thought, what if later never arrives in quite the way you planned? What if the only time you ever actually have is this imperfect, unfinished, surprisingly beautiful now? It was not a new idea. She had read it in various forms, in various places. But there is a difference between knowing something and knowing it, between the idea that lives in your head and the understanding that settles into your body like warmth. Standing in Clement's garden, with its 31 years of becoming, she had felt it settle. She was still learning to trust it, but she was learning. On a Sunday in late November, she built the bench. Not the bench from page 9. That design had required joints she didn't know how to cut and which she hadn't bought. This bench was simpler. 2 short sections of reclaimed timber from the stack, a plank across the top, sanded smooth, sealed against the weather. It took most of the morning and it was not beautiful in any grand sense. It was a little low to the ground. One end was very slightly higher than the other. She put it in the corner of the garden, under the spot where the light came through from next door's horse chestnut tree in long, golden bars on clear afternoons. She sat on it. It held. She sat there for a long time, long enough for the cold to settle into her coat and for the sky to move from white to the pale gold of a winter afternoon, and she looked at the garden, at the 3 raised beds and the winding path and the lavender and the bareback wall and the small patch of earth where the wildflowers were waiting underground, patient and invisible, doing whatever seeds do in the dark. It was not finished. It was not what she had planned. There were still pages in the folder she hadn't acted on. There were still things she didn't know how to do. The rose hadn't arrived yet. The bench was slightly lopsided. The path ended somewhat abruptly by the left fence, because she had run out of slate and hadn't yet decided what to do about that. And she let herself feel this, quietly and without condition. It was genuinely lovely. Not despite its gaps. Not in spite of the things still to come. Lovely right now, in this form, on this afternoon, with her in it. She heard Clement on the other side of the fence. The familiar soft movement, the tuneless hum. "I built the bench," she called out. A pause. "Good," he said. And then, "Sitting on it." "Yes," she said. Another pause, warm and unhurried. "Good," he said again. And that was all. And it was enough. Somewhere under the soil by the left fence, the sweet peas were still there. She hadn't forgotten them. She just wasn't worried about them anymore. They would come when they came, green and reaching and ridiculous with color, or perhaps not at all. Perhaps something would go wrong and they wouldn't make it and she would plant something else, something unplanned, something she hadn't researched. Either way, the ground was ready. Either way, she would be here. Either way, there was time, not the anxious, shrinking time of deadlines and deferred satisfaction, but the other kind of time. The slow kind. The kind that belongs to gardens and patient old neighbors and the quiet work of learning, at last, that unfinished does not mean incomplete. That a thing can be whole and still becoming. That you can rest in the middle of it. That the bench doesn't have to be perfect to hold you. It just has to hold you. And hers did. The end.